Is it time to reimagine your future? The right business skills may make a difference in your career. At Capella University, we offer a relevant education that's designed to focus on what you need to know in the business world. We'll teach professional skills to help you pursue your goals, like business management, strategic planning, and effective communication. And you can apply these skills right away. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Welcome to Mind Love Premium, episode 83. Today's episode is all about matrix programming and the game of life.
When I'm able to step out, it's easier for me to look at things differently because I'm not entrenched in how bad things are or what I want different from life. I'm able to completely become aware of, well, if it's a game, then how can I play this game more efficiently? If we exit the matrix, what we're doing is that we're taking a look at the way things are in terms of the way people believe things are, and we're asking, is that necessarily true? Is that something that will help me and help others, really? And as consciousness evolves and as humanity evolves, a lot of the times we realize that things that may have helped us in the past may not help us as much now.
It's a new day, a new episode, and a new opportunity to subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you always know about new episodes. Plus, it makes you one of my favorite people. Because the more subscribers I have, the more I attract amazing guests to help better serve you. So don't forget to subscribe. What if life is just a game? Clearly a really intense game, if so. Back in 1925, Florence Scovel Shinn wrote a book called The Game of Life and How to Play It. The premise is that life isn't supposed to be a battle. It's more a game of giving and receiving. Whatever we send out into the world will eventually be returned to us. Then we have Elon over there telling us that life is most likely a simulation because if you assume any rate of improvement at all, games will eventually be indistinguishable from reality. And then we have the CIA docs that were released that seem to confirm the holographic universe theory. It kind of makes you wonder, right? Back in high school, I took philosophy. Life-changing course for a high schooler raised in an absolutist religion, by the way. We watched The Matrix in class and were assigned to write a report on its relationship to Plato's allegory of the cave. If you're not familiar with this, I'm going to give you a little synopsis because it's one of the most well-known philosophical concepts in history, so you should know it. The allegory states that there are prisoners chained together in a cave. Behind the prisoners is a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners are people carrying puppets and other objects. Well, this casts a shadow on the other side of the wall. The prisoners watch these shadows, believing them to be real, without seeing the people holding the puppets behind them. I have an image on the show notes page to give you a visual, so go to mindlove.com/X83 to see it. Well, Plato's allegory suggests that what we see and experience might just be a shadow of the deeper truth. The Matrix was based off of this. So was The Truman Show. Interesting, too, because the holograph universe theory suggests that what we experience is just a reflection of something greater. So what is that something greater? Could it be the controllers of the game? And no, I'm not presuming that the controllers of the game are a bunch of tech nerds sitting around having a LAN party with their computers connected together. No, I'm wondering if the controllers of the game are possibly a part of ourselves that we've forgotten. Even Albert Einstein said, life is just a game. First you have to learn the rules of the game, and then play it better than anyone else. It sounds absurd to think of life as just a game when we're bogged down with all of our stresses and griefs and struggles. But what if that's the point? To see beyond the matrix that we're living in, with our false perceptions about what's important and what's valuable. To be cracked open by our pain so that we can find the deeper meaning. Plato posits that one prisoner could become free. He finally sees the fire and realizes the shadows are fake. The prisoner could escape from the cave and discover that there's a whole new world outside that he was previously unaware of. So what if that's your role here? What if your natural inclination to seek and find podcasts like Mind Love? Because you're on the forefront of lifting the veil. Well, that's what we're contemplating today. Our guest is Nick Zei. You may recognize him from Instagram. I've followed him for a long time, and he's awesome. He's an author, speaker, and explorer of the connection between science, spirituality, and self-realization. His goal is to be in service to others during the evolution of consciousness and to participate and help bring forth the awakening of humanity. So 3 key things we will learn are about societal matrix programs, the law of one and what it's based on, and how we can see a more complete version of reality. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up or text the word morning to 33777. And now let's welcome Nick Zei to the show.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I've been following you for quite a while. I'm going to be linking to your Instagram and TikTok and all that because I think I would love to push anybody there because it's just every single video you do, I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I needed to hear right now.
Yeah, we're throwing around a lot of different ideas and linking things together. That's really what I try to focus on is getting science, spirituality, self-realization, and kind of get it connected so people can see that there's more to the story, really.
Yeah, for sure. And I just resonate with so many things. And especially now with just the craziness that that's going on in the world, there's so many different angles of beliefs around what's actually happening. And I think so much of it comes back to, for me, I'll get stuck in this cycle of like, well, what's true? Is it this? Is it this? Like, what do I need to know? But every time that I feel myself feeling unstable, I remember that sometimes it doesn't always matter what exactly the thing is that is true. The thing that I need to come back to is kind of finding that power within myself. What are your beliefs around that?
I like to say that I know nothing. I really don't know anything for sure. And I'm just out here exploring reality. Whatever has the most evidence, I like to say that probably has some substance to it, but I'm not entrenched in things to where it is this way. It's just like, this is probably the way things are. And if somebody told me something different and it had convincing evidence, I'm not going to turn it down.
Definitely. And I know a lot of your teachings come back to this idea of the matrix and, exiting the matrix or which things are societal programming. And I remember at the beginning of my spiritual journey, I didn't fully understand what was being referred to when people talked about the matrix. So when you're talking about it, what does it mean to you?
This is a tough question, and it's a great question at the same time because there's so many people who say so many different things about the matrix concept. Because you can look at it from so many different angles. For example, a really great book is The Divine Matrix by Greg Braden. And
I'm reading that right
really
now.
Positive. Okay, well, there you go. I mean, that's such a fantastic book. And if you read that book, what he's getting at is that there's a divine matrix, a field that encompasses everything that is harmonious. And more when I'm talking about exiting the matrix in the terms that I do, I don't really talk about it as much now because I see that there's so much polarization with it that I'm just kind of like, I'm just going to talk about more the all-encompassing thing. But when it comes to the matrix, I would say that it's societal thought forms that this is the way things are. And those can be somewhat helpful and somewhat hurtful, because they guide us into staying alive a lot of the times, but there are parts of that societal thought form that are really limiting and really hurt people, and that could be materialistic definitions of what success are, or that could be just your parents even giving you low self-worth because that's how they were raised, and it's just this societal kind of program, you could say, of, I guess it would just be simply put, lack. And so if we exit the matrix, what we're doing is that we're taking a look at the way things are in terms of the way people believe things are, and we're asking, is that necessarily true? Is that something that will help me and help others, really? And as consciousness evolves and as humanity evolves, a lot of the times we realize that things that may have helped us in the past may not help us as much now.
I go back and forth between wondering if this kind of the game of the universe is how the essence of existence or consciousness just is versus what if we're living in a simulation? I remember when Elon Musk came in and he's like, the chances are so much greater that we're living in a simulation than not. What do you think about that?
Well, I have my own podcast named Universe the Game. So I've studied a lot about the different types of ways of looking at life as a game. And the simulation hypothesis is very interesting. And to me, when people say simulation, you have to really understand the definition of what simulation means. And it just, to me, what it means at least, is that things are simulated as in, imagine there was the military was training for a war. They're going to simulate what a war was like, but can they actually get hurt in the simulation? Let's just say for this argument, no, you can't. So when you say that there's a simulation, to me, what you're saying is that you're in a video game in which you can't actually get hurt, in which you exist. Rather, a more clear definition would be that you exist beyond the game, that you exist beyond the simulation, that there's more to you that exists in whatever we want to call it. You could call it time-space if you're taking Dewey Larson's physics. You could call it the soul world if you're talking about Dr. Michael Newton's work. There's many different interpretations. You could even call it the Tao, because that's what Taoism is about. It's about everything is the Tao. But when you try and name what the Tao is, that's not actually what the Tao is. That's like, I think, the first verse of the Book of the Way, which is what they call it in Taoism. And a lot of people don't know that, but I actually have studied a lot of Eastern philosophy, and not necessarily just philosophy, but the way that they look at things, because it is directly correlated with what a lot of people see as spirituality. That a lot of it has originated in Eastern traditions, and it has been around for thousands of years. But a lot of times in Hinduism, they use terminology that comes in stories. Like the Bhagavad Gita is a story, but there's a lot of wisdom in the Bhagavad Gita, but it's hard for somebody who's in the Western area to go so far out as to study these topics. It takes a lot of willpower, I guess you could say, or a lot of curiosity. That's really what it was for me. Because when I got into this journey, I'm like, is life a simulation? Is this all a game? And after my many years of study, I'm like, yes, it is to a certain respect. And, we could talk about different philosophies or teachings on how to complete the game, because that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Oh, we're going to go down that rabbit hole. But first, I'm curious, how did you get your introduction into any of these teachings? Were you raised with them? Did you find them later on in life?
So my dad was Catholic. My mom was just kind of non-denominational. She just went to churches. They got divorced early on. And so my dad knew I was just not one that enjoyed going to church. I just didn't. But I went there and I participated. But, I had moments where I was really into it and then I really wasn't into it. And I guess there was a moment when I was in college. I went to college for kinesiology and very body-related things, and I was going to be in physical therapy. I did an internship. And, throughout, if you've been in Christianity, there's times where the pastor might come up and say, like, if you want to be saved, come up front. And you're like, yeah.
Yeah, so I did that like 25 times.
Yeah, me too. Well, not 25, but I did it a couple times that were memorable. And then I remember the last time that I went up there, and it was at a church I'd never been to, and I was just in college, and nobody was with me that I knew. And I did it, and then I went up front, and then I was like, there doesn't seem like there's anything to this. Is there like any real substance to what's happening? I feel like it's just words. And there was many teachings in there that I didn't necessarily agree with. And so that's what really started it for me. Was I went to church growing up. I went to Wednesday nights and Sunday nights growing up. And there were just some things that I just didn't really, I wanted to see if that was the truth. I questioned whether that was the whole picture. Could all the truth of man be in one book? And so that kind of started my journey into Eastern philosophy. Then I read a lot of Wayne Dyer's interpretations of, he has a book called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, which is one of the beginning books that I started with, where he breaks down the Tao and all the different teachings of it. I'm like, whoa, this is really interesting. But at the same time as that, I got into all the negativity of the world. I had I was serving tables at Red Lobster at that point, and this was a long time ago. And somebody told me to look up some things that were happening in music videos. And it was just, way back in the day, and it just blew my mind. I'm like, no, what is going on? So then I had the whole negative. I got into, is everything negative? And then I got led into the positive, like there's more to the story. And now I'm at like this kind of bird's eye view instead of, I think that there's a lot of people that struggle because they might be in the how bad the world is. But I just wanted to remind people, and that's really why I do what I do, is I figured out something that my friend told me today, actually, or he did a video on. He said, it's better to light a candle in the dark than to curse at it. And I thought that was really interesting. And so that's why the content that I make is just exploring reality, because I'm like, I want to light that for others, because there was others that brought me out of the darkness, and I want to do the same for other people as well.
This episode is brought to you by Etsy.
Oh.
Hear that?
Okay. Thank you.
Etsy knows these aren't the sounds of holiday gifting. Well, not the ones you're hoping for. You want squeals of delight. Happy tears.
How did you?
And spontaneously written songs of joy.
I am so happy. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, the song needs a bit of work, but anyway, to get those reactions, make sure everyone on your list feels heard with handmade, handpicked, and designed gifts from small shops on Etsy. Gifts like personalized jewelry, custom artwork, cozy style items, vintage pieces, and home decor to celebrate all of your favorite people and their specific kind of special. For original gifts that say, I get you, Etsy has it.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
I feel the same, and I can get caught in all the rabbit holes. I have been in all the rabbit holes to where all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm seeing a whole different aspect of this Disney movie, or like whatever it is. And then it's really easy to kind of see everything going wrong in the world, however deep you want to take that, whether you're just seeing government overreach or you're seeing another layer of that, or like how one company owns everything, like whatever it is, whatever level that you're at, then what do you do from there other than kind of change your inner world? And one thing that I've noticed, even especially through the last 2 years, is that what I'm focusing on expands. I mean, that's one of the basic laws. And so I will see more and more of all the negative stuff. And there's only so much that I can do with that knowledge versus, okay, well, now it's time to kind of get out of that and know that it's there and just know that I have my inner work to do so that my reality is being processed differently. And I think that two people can be living through the exact same thing. They can be twin sisters with the same parents, and depending on how they're looking at their situation, doesn't necessarily mean they don't go through hardships in their own ways, but the one who sits in the victim mentality versus the one who's like, well, I'm the only person that's going to be responsible for my life, and whatever I'm creating is going to be contagious to the people that are around me. And to realize the power that you have in that can change your whole perception of that same reality.
100%. 100%. That's a mic drop moment. I mean, I don't even really know what to add to that. I agree.
So when you are sharing some of the things that you share online, what do you hope that people take away from it? What do you hope people realize so that they can kind of be that change?
Yeah, that's been an evolving one for me, because at the beginning I thought to myself, well, what's going to be the value somebody's going to get out of some of these concepts that might seem either esoteric or very scientifically technical? At first it was, well, it doesn't matter because how is it going to apply to their daily life? But then I started to realize something that was really profound, and it's really been the driving force behind what I do. And if I can just give one person a moment of transcendence to see that there's more going on here, sometimes it's not necessarily how to get out. That's not necessarily what they need. It's why. Why should I get out? Why shouldn't, and when I'm saying getting out, I mean, why should I transcend this? Why should I overcome this? Or why should I even try to? Why should I take the time and not stay in this place of suffering? And so I've come to realize recently that those moments of the big picture that, when I was thinking about this when I did the time-space stuff, because I did a lot of videos a little while ago about how the universe is basically two halves, and that there's space-time and there's time-space. And how does that apply to real life? Because it's Dewey Larson's theories, and the law of one confirmed his work, which is really interesting, because you don't usually get something like the law of one in itself is, we can talk about law of one too, but for another book to confirm, that's supposedly channeled, to confirm somebody's physics model, that's how I even came across that. And at first I was like, what does this even matter? But then it's almost like you link all of these different spiritual traditions together. But many different things are saying the same thing in a different way. So when people watch my video, my hope is that they might come in having no knowledge, but that I talk in such simple terminology that you can get it. That's why I don't use a ton of big words, because I don't want people to feel like they can't understand me. So when somebody comes in, no matter what level you're at, you're able to take something away from that video that you might not have known, and maybe add it to, oh, well, that's interesting because maybe in the Bible it says this, but then in Hinduism it might say this, in the law of one it says this, and they're all kind of connected. They might be saying it in a different way. There might be distortion in each one, but what is the underlying thing that's in there? And each one is going to have its own distortion. That's just the nature of books that are thousands of years old. But that's kind of why I do what I do, to give people that moment of, this is worth doing. This is worth not distracting myself.
Yeah, I look at, especially when I started really following multiple channelers and seeing what was coming through, you're right. The resounding message is all so very similar. And sometimes there will be a little bit of tweaks or maybe a greater emphasis by depending what entity is supposedly coming through. And the way I look at that is like, if we are all kind of aspects of the same consciousness here to have different expressions, then why wouldn't a potential higher being be the same? Or are they supposed to be completely all-knowing, or are they coming through this person for some reason because of the perspective that will be filtered through, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
I want to go back to kind of this idea that the life or existence is a game, because I know a lot of my listeners will understand what's meant by that and other people won't, and maybe we all have different interpretations of it. But what do you see it as?
So I have an upcoming book that I'm going to explain this more in, and I've already written that part, and it's all done. And the gist of it, and it's not just in the book, but I talk about it all the time in many different places. And the gist of it is that whatever level you want to go to outside of this reality, like a teaching such as Dolores Cannon or Dr. Michael Newton will say you're a soul that exists outside of this material existence. Then you'll have other teachings that say that there's an afterlife. The Bible does say there's an afterlife, but it doesn't talk about reincarnation. At least this iteration of the Bible doesn't talk about reincarnation. And so you look at other traditions, and they're all talking about some sort of afterlife, or in Taoism, it would be more, there's the Tao that exists outside of this. So there's some sort of existence outside of this material realm that we're connected to. So when you say life is a game, I look at it like imagine if you're listening that you're on a computer or that you have an Xbox. Literally, just keep it simple. When you're using an Xbox, you have a controller in your hand and you're looking at a screen, right? And you know that you're not in the game because there's a part of your awareness that's aware that it's not in the game. But imagine that instead of playing the game with a controller in your hand, you're actually inside of the controller, and then I took the part of your awareness away that remembered that I'm in a game. That part is gone. So now, how are you able to discern that you're in a game and you're not? That's kind of what people say the veil is, the veil of forgetting. You'll hear that over and over in spirituality. And that's basically saying that you have to forget in order to play the game. That's like one of the premises. And you could say that for many reasons, and you can even go back to Alan Watts when he talks about how if you were to dream, what would be the most exciting dream? And it would be to forget that you're the dreamer. And so that's essentially, you can look at it as you're awakening within a dream, you're playing a game where you're realizing you're in a game, many different interpretations, but they're saying the same thing, that you exist beyond this and that you're in some sort of, you could say it from the Ram Dass perspective either, where it's a meat suit, you're in a meat suit, or, that's the beauty of it, is you see so many people are saying the same thing, that it's like there's this immortal energy that exists beyond this, and that it can't be created nor destroyed, but it can just be transferred. So from the Dr. Newton perspective, it would be as though your soul is inside the body and it's playing. And, from a holographic universe perspective, it would be that everyone is the same being, just split up and fractalized into many beings, and they're all non-local. It's all non-local. And that's from the book, if you want to understand the holographic principles, and that's from the book, The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, which I highly recommend. It's a very, very interesting book too.
Yeah, I've been going down the rabbit hole of all of these things because I find that even when I do remember or I learn and I retain certain information and it kind of changes the way that I view the world, as time goes on, when normal life struggles come up, it's like I forget again and I have to completely remind myself. There's a few different times on ayahuasca that I remember there's this one time in particular that my husband and I were just like, okay, this is not what we should be doing with our money right now. Like, is this really a smart choice to make? We have so much work to do. And it was just, we were bogged down with just all of the little intricacies of life. And we're like, no, we wanted to do this because there was more. It was also a group of people that we had been wanting to connect with as well. And we ended up doing it. And the next morning, we were just like, that was the best thing we could have ever done. It just reset everything. And we went back to the same lives that we were in the day before. And suddenly it was like all of these things that had piled up were just a lot lighter. It felt weightless. And so I'm curious for you, how does this information about life potentially being a game or even a holographic universe, how does that change the way that you move through your life?
Well, I see it as it's very clear that this thing is temporary, that you're only going to be here for a certain time, whether or not you think it's a game. It reminds me that what's going on here is it's something that you can work through and that is not necessarily always going to be there, which in a simpler way, you could literally just say that everything is change and that the problems or so-called problems that I have in my life are changeable. And it really depends on perception. I mean, that's something that Dr. David Hawkins, for those who have studied levels of consciousness, know that everything is perception. And, many people have said that throughout thousands of years. And so when I'm able to step out, it's easier for me to look at things differently because I'm not entrenched in how bad things are or what I want different from life. I'm able to completely become aware of, well, if it's a game, then how can I play this game more efficiently? It's not like I was playing it wrong. It's like, what's the efficient way to do this? That's why maybe some things you've done in your life, they weren't necessarily wrong. There's just actions and consequences. So those consequences of those things will be that maybe if you talked rude to someone, they're not going to like you as much. But it's changeable, and that's just an action. And then if I want to live life more efficiently, then I'm just going to, okay, life's a game. There's a part of this is an important part, really, that the controller itself has its own suggestions that it gives to me to do. And that if I understand life's a game, then the controller is suggesting things like Siri might suggest to go to certain to do things, or GPS, however you want to look at it. There's suggestions going on, but I am not those suggestions. Even when my own mind says that I am this, I am that it's just a controller talking. And that it's almost as though, like Dr. Bruce Lipton said, that there's a tape player and the tape player is always playing. That's the subconscious mind. And so there's a part of your mind that is just a storehouse of information. And in Hinduism, they call this storehouse consciousness. So there's a storehouse of information within the controller. The controller says things, but I can change what it says and I can become more aware. Like you were just talking about with ayahuasca, you became more aware that it was all kind of trivial, the way that you were handling things. And so what it really does is it allows me to understand that the controller has suggestions and I'm outside of those, and I even exist beyond those, and that would be even on an ultimate absolute level, that would be the I am awareness consciousness or pure consciousness. And so what I see it as is that it's just theatrics of the same one being, and it's relatively true. And I think it's important to realize on the spiritual journey that there are things that people will say that are relatively true depending on where you're at in your spiritual journey. And from another perspective, there might be even more to it.
Way to eat a tea. You're listening to an ad for PC Game Pass. Want new games on day one like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle? How about living out your Sims life with EA Play? We're talking high-quality PC games all for one low monthly price. We got you. Learn more at xbox.com/PC Game Pass or click the banner. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle available December 9th, 2024. Game catalog varies by region and over time. Okay, that's the ad. You can go back to doing whatever you were doing now.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to somebody about that same thing this morning. And so sometimes it's hard to be in a position of sharing information because there are infinite perspectives that may internalize it. And they all have, like, for an example, I send out a daily email, and usually when I say something around the idea that struggle is a choice or that there is no right or wrong, there just is. And it's usually directly from some spiritual teaching. But I almost always get about a 10 people like, this is what I needed to hear. And then there's always one person that's like, you don't know that. Like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, there's terrible things. And I'm like, yeah, I know there's terrible things. How can you say there's no bad? Or how can you be so privileged to say that there is no struggle? And I'm like, I mean, I've lived through struggle before, like it can be hard to wade through. How do you do that as a public figure?
That's tough, man. Some people are in it, they're in it. And a lot of times when I just realized that at one point I was also in it, it's relatable to me for them to come at me that way because I was there at some point in my life and having been through that. But one thing that I always come back to is that when people say that things that you were just saying, I see it as we never have enough information to say whether something is good or bad because we can't see everything that's ever happening. And so from one perspective, it might seem bad that the suffering has happened or that this person is suffering, but we don't literally know. The amount of knowledge that you could have in a given situation is infinite. You could have the infinite amount of knowledge, but you don't, and none of us do. And I definitely don't, that's for sure. So then I can't come to the conclusion that it's bad or wrong because there might be something with years down the line that it's leading towards. And a great example of this is Dr. Joe Dispenza, who got into his bike accident. To him, when he got into a bike accident, he could have seen it as it was wrong, it was terrible. But then look what he's doing now. He's helping millions. And so I'm just like, well, hold on. I can't decide if this is good or bad. I'm just going to step out and I'm just going to surrender to how I can either look at this in a way that helps me or helps others to be in a more harmonious state. Because I feel like that's kind of the point of consciousness. And that's a highly debated topic in itself. What's the point of all this?
I definitely relate. There was a part of my story in my early 20s. I ended up in a terrible relationship and didn't realize I was with a sociopath until it was way too late. And I was already kind of stuck in his programming, and there were so many mind games. And long story short, I got out of that. By the time I finally got out of it, it was because I somehow landed in jail for his crime, ended up taking a felony for something that I did not do because our cases were combined. And if I went to trial to prove my innocence, which I could have, it would automatically mean that he got 10 years in jail. And at the time I was I don't even know the word. This part of me wants to say too stupid, but I've got to...
Innocent?
Yes, it was too innocent to realize that that was the dumbest thing I could have done. But I will say, like, when I threw it, at that moment, if you would have told me any spiritual teaching at all, I would have been like, screw off, like, leave me alone. You don't know my struggle. Like, I ruined my whole life, or my whole life is ruined because of this person, a lot of blame. And now in hindsight, not only was that the struggle that I needed to become interested in even the things that led to so much transformation, but even on another level, I was too ashamed to write the whole crazy story on 2 lines of a job application. And so it's what got me interested in being an entrepreneur. I was like, this is my only route. And now one of the things I talk about a lot is using your limitations as guideposts towards your higher purpose. I could have sat there and been like, well, this was taken from me and this option was taken from me. And now what? So I'm just going to sit here and do nothing and waste away. But instead I'm like, okay, all of these options are taken, which means there's only one path to go through. And then I can go through it confidently and not doubt my decisions because it's the only path I feel like I have. And so to me, when I look at something like struggle as a perception, yeah, that whole thing was a struggle. It was really hard. And other people have gone through things that are even harder. But you can sit there and be like, the world is against me. But where does that leave you? Like, what does that leave you to move forward with at all? Versus, okay, I could be totally wrong about this. Maybe all my spiritual beliefs are bullshit. But if it feels empowering to me to look at something a different way, then all that's doing is giving me the strength to do something greater than I'm doing right now.
Yep. There it is, folks. That's powerful. That's it right there. Because it's one of the hardest things to do is to see everything as a catalyst, you could say. Because you can choose to say that things happen to you as much. There's nobody stopping you. Nobody's forcing you to see things in any way. Some people might be trying, but they can't actually do that. Nobody can truly control your perception. And so when you think about things like that, it's like, yeah, you could do it, but what's it going to help you? Well, it's not going to help you at all. And so at some point, it seems like most people get beat down enough to where they finally say, all right, let's do this. I'm ready to change. And so up until that point where you're like, okay, it's time, you're going to see it as, this is bad, this is negative, why is this happening? I want these other things, but I'm not getting it. But there's a lesson in that. But it's like a treasure chest that you don't have the key to until you take responsibility for your perception. You don't have to take responsibility necessarily for everything that ever happened because we don't know. But all you can do in that moment is take responsibility for how I'm perceiving reality right now. That's where you start. That's where I would say you'd start. And if you're able to say, well, you know what? I actually just want to be happy. I just want to make a decent amount of money. And if I see myself as a victim or that money's hard to make or that this is really difficult, life is difficult, it's hard, then maybe things will start to happen that way because I believe that. And then the question becomes, at what point does my perception create reality? At what point does my own beliefs create reality? And that's a topic that many people will spend their whole lives trying to decipher. What amount of power do we have as individuals? And I would say that we can all create micro realities. And there's a macro reality in which we all exist in as well. And we have the power to control our micro, and then inherently, when all of us come together as humans, that's what the macro is. So by each of us deciding that we can control necessarily where we go to some respect. Now, there's going to be other implications in there, like maybe some people will say that you have things that you chose in the soul world. There's soul contracts, and some will say that there's karma as well. But you can still keep pushing through those things. it's still available to do. And then, another thing that I talk about a lot is quantum mechanics and the nonlinear realm and how we can work nonlinearly by understanding that we are energy. In a sense, if you went back to the question that, what does it help you to see life as a game? Well, if you understand that you're energy and you exist beyond the game, then maybe there's a field of potentials in which you can access that field. And that when you do access that field, maybe it has an effect. Let's just assume, or not assume, but let's just kind of contemplate that it might. And this is the basis for what I think true law of attraction is. I think there's a lot of BS out there with law of attraction, but there's a lot of BS out there with everything, right? So that's a really interesting thing when you get into the quantum realm, is that it says essentially what you said earlier, where you said what you focus on does tend to have an effect on what happens to you. And that's actually true in the quantum realm as well.
It's interesting because I totally agree that there's a lot of bullshit about the law of attraction. And also, I think that sometimes it turns people away from big ideas, because then there's all these people that are like, oh, the law of attraction is BS. And it's like, yeah, if you look at it just from like maybe the point of view of like the first few chapters of The Secret, yeah, it does kind of sound like BS. Like I had a bunch of people when that book first came out and they're just like, I'm just going to do whatever. I'm going to float around and everything's just going to be fine. And I'm like, I feel like you got to put some effort to meet the universe with this, like show the universe that you're ready for it. But it is interesting too, where you talked about working with things non-linearly. And I have spoken to people that have an idea of, doing past life regressions and healing past lives, which can affect your present. There's also people that talk about visualization, which then can affect your future. But then there's people that I've interviewed that are like, I think Christian Bush talked about the science of serendipity. And he's not a woo-woo guy at all, but he was just showing basically the science of what happens when you hold an idea that everything's going to work out and how that just automatically makes you approach the world differently. And so, for example, somebody can feel like they're unworthy. They can feel like I'm going to apply for a job right now that I don't meet one of the qualifications. So why am I even here? And they give a weak handshake and they talk meekly because they feel like they're going to be shut down anyways, versus the person who goes in, they're like, yeah, I don't meet these qualifications on paper, but I know I'm a badass. I know I can do better than anybody else at this job. And they go in there and they present themselves as such. And so then it opens the opportunity. Or you go into a coffee shop and you're like, I hate people, blah, blah, blah. And you're like closed off, versus somebody who's like, opportunities are everywhere. And they walk in with a smile and they end up meeting the person that they marry or whatever. And that's really the science behind the serendipities. But you can look at it in this very practical way. And you can also look at it in a way of like, you change your energy based on how you're viewing your reality, and that will attract or turn away your next step forward or like hold you back.
Right. And it's all saying the same thing, that we can affect what happens. And however far you want to go deep with that, it's up to you. If you want to say that nothing happens except, we were just talking about with the serendipity, that it works. It's still the same in its core, still the same concept. But when it comes to quantum, there was a experiment done a long time ago. For those that know science, it was called the double slit experiment. And basically, some weird things happened in that experiment where we found out that when something is observed, it changes from a wave into a particle. That's just the simplest way to say it. When it didn't have to necessarily be, because there's people, I did a video on this and people got really salt with me because I didn't distinguish between what an observer actually is. And an observer can be a recorder. It doesn't have to be a human. So I just want to make that clear. I've seen a lot of people in this field take it to that next step, and I've seen people have incredible results. And it really links back to what you were saying a second ago, because what people will do is that they'll go into meditation, and when they go into meditation, they'll let go of their identity. Essentially, they just let go of who they think they are. And when you're able to do that, then you're able to tap into much more clearly, and to me, easier than if you were in physical reality and you were just saying, well, I'm kind of nervous, like you said, about this interview and I don't have the qualifications. If you went into a meditation and you let go of your identity and you started to go into the space where you embody that person who got the job, and you were to do, as other people might have said, visualization. But to me, visualization is just one very small part of it, because there's many more senses than just visual. So what many different people, such as Dr. Joe Dispenza, come to the conclusion of is that by going into the field where you don't have an identity, you enter the quantum field. And in the quantum field, there are all possibilities. This is also called the Copenhagen interpretation in quantum mechanics. And so all the potential realities exist in that field. And all you have to do is start to use, as Neville Goddard would say, imagination is basically the key. You use your imagination to use your senses to tap into that identity, or maybe that goal or that thing. And that when you do this, it's much easier in your daily life to tap into that when you're trying to create a different life. And it can be so simple as, I want a different job, or I want to feel happiness. Well, if you get beyond who you think you are and you enter that field of energy that you are, beyond all of the game, then it doesn't seem so difficult because you've practiced it. It's just like shooting a basketball. You got to practice shooting a basketball to get good. I was trash at basketball when I started. Now I don't play sports now, but back in the day, back in high school, it's just like that when it comes to changing your identity. And it can be very practical, as people can do it without the meditation and without that thing. But when I say you work non-linearly, a big part of what I would call accurate law of attraction is that when you change your identity, or manifestation, whatever you want to call it, when you change your identity, it affects how things come to you. It affects what literally appears in your life, and that you'll get opportunities, and you'll have synchronicities, you'll have events happen because you're different. Your energy is different, and that actually affects your entire micro. And then if enough of us are able to tap into that power to create, to be a co-creator, or to just bring things into their life in a more harmonious way, then society will probably change as a whole, because society is just what we believe it to be. But when enough of us change our belief of what it is, then it will change.
One example that just came up is I'm reminded of this power so often. And it's like the universe has to meet me there. And it's like, here, let me show you these things that you're starting to forget. And I was knee deep I'm creating a course on organic podcast growth, because I've spoken at conferences about it and people keep asking, and I'm like, okay, I'm finally ready. And so I've been knee deep in specific information about how to get featured in podcast apps. And then after like 3 days of working on this, I all of a sudden get an email from Apple, and they're requesting my artwork in PSD form, Photoshop form, for a potential feature. Now, I don't know if it's going to happen yet. That'd be amazing. But I'm sitting there, and like, that's all I was focused on. And I was kind of bogged down from life. And then out of the blue, I did not reach out to Apple for anything about this. And I'm like, see, this is just the universe mirroring what I need to remember. But it can be difficult, I know, for a lot of people. And one of the things that comes up when people question me is that it's how sometimes the law of attraction can facilitate a sort of spiritual bypassing, the right word, basically that it blames people for feeling negative, like it's their fault that bad things are happening to them. How do you respond to something like that?
It takes a whole hero's journey to understand this, because it does definitely look like that when you come in after not having went through your own journey to understanding why things happen the way that they do, and that it's not your fault. The way that I see this is, though, you're talking about the subconscious mind a little bit earlier, and it's like when you are a child, when you're a youngin', your brainwave states are in lower states, and that's likened to hypnosis. And so you're very suggestible to information. People could tell you anything and you'd believe it. You couldn't critically think as a child. Now, when you start to grow up, you get older, your brainwave states go higher, and then you develop the ability to critically think. And so a lot of the times what might happen is that we don't even know that those are in there, and it wasn't our fault because we were a child and we had no idea what was going in there. So then we might even interpret reality a certain way because of what other people put on us. I know what you're saying when you're saying bypassing, and there's more to it when it comes to feelings as well, and we'll get to that. But first off, I see it as though people just in consciousness, souls are in bodies and they just don't know what's going on. We all come in the same way. We all don't know. And a lot of us think we know. And like I said at the beginning, I don't know. But what I have kind of come to the conclusion of is that a lot of times our parents and our friends and our families will put in ideas in our head because they think that's what's best for us. But then later on in our life, we realize maybe that's not the best for us. And it's just kind of how life went. And it's not really bad. It's not good. It's just kind of the process of being human. And I see it as a universal thing that we all go through this. We all have things that we struggled with from our childhood and even growing up and even now, maybe, definitely for me. And so when it comes to things and manifesting and things coming into your life, it's almost as though I hope that the background information then helps people to see that we might be bringing things in without even realizing it. And that though that's just kind of the process of learning how to create is a lot of the times in life, the way that we figure out what we want to do is we figure out what we don't want to do. And if our life is in shambles, like mine was, for example, coming out of college when I decided not to do physical therapy, I took out $15,000 in credit card debt, and I did the classic law of attraction, very like the what I would call the false law of attraction or the simple, which really doesn't work. I just thought things would happen, but I didn't put in the effort. And then I took all that money to make a business, and then the business failed because I was just like, let me let it happen to me. I'm just going to chill, and I'm not going to do anything. And then I lost all the money. And then I'm like, okay, this isn't it. And so that really led me to realize that it's not just all about sitting back, but there's also a level of effort that comes with it. So if people feel like it's their fault for being in a lower vibration, I just want to remind people that was a roundabout way to say that feelings necessarily aren't bad and that you have feelings stored within the body from your childhood. And that can be in the subconscious mind, or it can just be energy blockages, however you want to look at it. And so when we want to let go of those, the letting go process a lot of the times comes with feeling the feelings, but then not identifying with the thoughts, that the thoughts are just what they are, but that from each feeling, there's an incredible amount of thoughts because there's a lot of words here. And so when we let go of the thoughts and we just address the feeling, a lot of the times we'll see that we don't want to bypass the feeling necessarily that we need to feel good all the time, but that maybe there's some things that are stored in there that we want to let go of. And the mechanism for us letting go of energy or letting go of this depression or sadness is to literally just feel the emotion. And so when we feel that emotion, we let go of that pressure. And the way that I talk about it is I don't think it's necessarily bad at all that we're feeling emotions. Now, the part that comes where we start to let go of our power is when we identify that the emotion is correct, or we say that the emotion is for some reason right, when it just is what it is. It's just energy. And so if we don't take that next step and identify that this is wrong, this shouldn't be here, I shouldn't be feeling this, and we just allow ourselves to literally, what I'll do is I'll lay in bed. If I'm feeling something heavy, I'll lay in bed, put a blanket on, and I'll just relax and just feel the emotion. And if you commit to doing that, it will leave. And you won't have this constant coming up. But then there's the next step, which is choosing. It's like, then we have a blank slate, then we got to choose what our next action is, because the subconscious will come up and then start to suggest different things to do from a mind perspective, not from an energy perspective. It's just because that's what we've done before. It doesn't care. Subconscious doesn't necessarily have a vendetta against us. It's just doing its job. It's just reporting. So then we choose after that, and then that's how I found that change happens. It's then when we change our identity of, I'm the type of person who does this. For example, I'm the type of person who might do these things. I'm an author. I'm a artist. I'm a business. I run this business. I'm successful. Those things we can still be in the theater of reality and still identify as the type of person to do this, and still know our immortal identity beyond all of it. And we can see it from that perspective. And then I'm not worried about when emotions come up, I feel the emotions, and I don't ever say that it's necessarily I shouldn't be feeling this. It's like, that's just, I'm surrendered to life being this at this moment. And if I'm feeling a lot of sadness, I'll feel it, then let it go. Then I'll continue on with choosing the life, choosing to do the things that I know will help me in whatever my goal is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's where the law of attraction strayed me wrong at first, is I would judge my emotions or feel like I was being in a wrong way because I was feeling certain things. And so that led to a lot of just that kind of fake overpowering with positivity, which never really works, and just kind of made me bitter. It was like I'd have a bitter smile on my face. Like, yep. I feel like shit, but I'm supposed to feel good. Right. And so now I do something very similar where I will just like kind of lay there and feel it. And I think the difference in what I do now is I try not to add more to the story. Like I could sit there and wallow in it and tell myself all the reasons why I'm feeling this way. And it gets bigger and bigger in my mind and usually end up feeling worse, versus kind of just tuning into the sensations that are happening in the body. And then it'll start to dissipate or release from my body at the same time. But I also know that if I go out into the world and take a lot of action when I'm in that state, I feel like I probably accrue negative karma, because it's too easy to have like road rage or to hate the person in front of me at the post office, whatever it is. And so that releasing process is really powerful. So thank you so much for everything that you've brought to this podcast today. And for listeners that are interested in learning more about you and following your work, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah. So, well, thanks for having me. It was amazing. I really enjoyed it. And where you can find me is nick.zei on Instagram. You can find me Nick Zei on YouTube and on TikTok as well. Nick Zei, it's the same across all platforms. And I'll send you my link tree or something, and people can just look at that if they want. But otherwise, I'm mostly on Instagram and TikTok right now because I've been writing the book like mad. So I don't have enough sauce in me to do YouTube videos and that. So that's taken a back seat. But yeah, you'll find most of my content, if you were to look like right now, it's on Instagram and TikTok for now. But, things change. And I'm sure as you continue on with your journey, you start to get into new things. And I know, doing YouTube videos, I have like 100 plus videos on YouTube, but I just don't have that consistency because I'm sure you're busy and you know that there's a lot going on in life and sometimes things happen. So that's what it is.
All the links for this episode are at mindlove.com/X83. Your challenge for this week is one of the greatest challenges you can do in your life. I highly suggest that you do this over and over again, periodically. It's to identify your own programming. And we all have it. The origins of this programming are to be debated. Sure, maybe it's some sinister agenda by the powers that be. Or maybe it's just how society naturally evolves. When there's capitalism, for example, which I'm not hating on, by the way. Capitalism can be amazing. The ability to start your own business based on your passion because you find a people who demand your skills is amazing to me. However, there are downsides, as there is with really anything. Like chocolate is delicious, but if you eat 100 of them, you're not going to feel good and you might gain weight. Or social media can be awesome for growing a business or for connecting with people, but there are a lot of downsides. It steals your attention and it can possibly rewire your brain. So like I said, everything in moderation. And when your life involves absolutely anything, it's important to recognize the downsides. Because guess who's not going to do that for you? The person who is selling you the product or the service or whatever it is. And through all of these things, we become very deeply programmed. People want to sell their amazing new anti-aging cream. And oftentimes that involves making you feel ugly and old, unfortunately. Well, we become conditioned and programmed based on the desires, the values, the thoughts of everybody around us. Friends, family, those who came before us, society, government, media. all of these sources have their own agendas, whether they realize it or not. And often we begin to do something because it's common or it's normalized around us without necessarily questioning, does this serve me? And this has a huge influence on our beliefs about ourselves and the world around us. And those beliefs will influence every action that you do or do not take. So getting to the root of your own programming might be a lifelong project. But the good news is, it doesn't take a whole lot of time to start seeing progress. And it's a lot easier to maintain than it is to start from scratch. So if you haven't done this before, it might feel like a pretty big undertaking. But the good news is, you only need to do one belief at a time, one behavior at a time to start seeing the progress. And like I said before, you see progress pretty quickly. And the work is worth it. So let me know how it goes. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa or leave a comment right on the show notes page at mindlove.com/X83. If you want to support MindLove, the best way to do so is by joining MindLove Premium at mindlove.com/premium. You get a whole backlog of over 50 exclusive episodes just for premium members, along with MindLove meditations and other bonuses. You can also support one of my amazing sponsors, I love them all dearly, or leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you do, I just might read your review on the show. And I have realized that Spotify hasn't always allowed reviews. This is a recent thing, and I would love to get more of them. So if you've left a review before on Apple Podcasts and you just really love what we do here at Mind Love, I would so appreciate it if you copied and pasted it or wrote a new one on Spotify. You will be my very best friend. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next time.